Yo, what's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well, whatever day that you're watching this. And I'm doing this video. It's kind of a follow up to some things that I had been talking about before regarding Texas. You know, we recently, Governor Abbott, the crook that he is, he basically passed a mandate, which essentially makes it illegal to be outside in most given situations without a mask. And there's a couple of different things that I have to discuss in that regards, just particularly in this video, because a lot of people just don't get it. So a lot of people are emotionally tied to these mask things. And there's the people that they look up to, entertainers, health officials, and so forth, have been all in on this mask. It's almost like it grants you immunity, though we know that's not the case. They point to some vague things such as, oh, well, look at the countries in Asia. They all wear masks, which is kind of odd to even point to that when you consider that the virus came from Asia. But it's one of those things where people are very emotionally tied to it because of what they believe that it does. When you have the situation that we have now, and that is people point to these masks and what have you, and they say if you don't wear it, they put the deaths on you, which is intellectually lazy, intellectually dishonest. It doesn't even make sense when we understand, or in terms of what we know about this virus. You have absolutely no way of knowing if that person without the mask or the person with the mask gave it to someone. And I've been looking into this as well, as far as evidence really to both sides, as far as studies and the effectiveness of these masks. Nonetheless, what has gotten me has been the mandates, which is why I've never told you guys to wear a mask. I've never told you guys not to wear a mask. I told you to do what you feel comfortable doing. Life is a risk. It was a risk long before this virus was a thing. It will be a risk long after. People pass bacteria, viruses. Some people are completely asymptomatic. Some people get mild symptoms depending on what virus that it is. And other people struggle with it. Other people get hospitalized. Other people die. This is what's happened over the course of human history. And some of these illnesses, more so these viruses, when they get in and you contract them, some of them don't have. If in other coronaviruses. But a lot of them don't have. You get viral pneumonia, if it's not associated with influenza, there is no cure. There's no vaccine. It has to just run its course. But the mandate, and what I'm trying to get you guys to understand, there's no order, no law small enough that a police officer, in the event that you choose to resist, won't stomp you out over, depending on how he's feeling. Best case scenario, cops don't enforce this nonsense, but that doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. So you're ensuring conflict, and it's odd because we have to have a mask mandate comes from the guys that have been crying and griping about Black Lives Matter. Now you're ensuring, well, let me just reiterate, you're ensuring conflict. Now, when I answer things like that, or when I point to things like that, what do people answer with? It's just a mask. Just wear the mask. It's just a mask. What's the big deal? It's just a piece of cloth. Just do it. Which effectively is just obey the law. Which effectively just he shouldn't have resisted in the event someone gets whooped up. And because it is just a mask, it's just so odd that you would want to force people to wear it. Because it's just a mask after all, right? Apparently it's not small enough to where you won't send someone to stomp a mud hole in someone in the event they resist. And that's the disconnect that a lot of people don't seem to understand when they advocate for status policies. This is why people can't make that connection with what causes some of these issues and gripes that people complain about when it comes to police brutality. You think that we want to limit those conflicts, and to be the same people that advocate for policies that would then on the other side, that more so, like when I say advocate for policy, I'm talking about policies. Look, these things don't have a victim. The mere event of me not wearing a mask or you not wearing a mask, no victim there. You can claim there is just because someone might get sick, but that's happened long before. The only way you could pin that on him is if they knowingly had it or at risk at some point and then went to actively spread it to someone purposely. But just the mere of passing of viruses, again, you don't know who's the one doing it. Just because you put on a mask does not mean that you can't pass it to someone else, because you can. But when we talk about it's just a mask, a lot of it flies over you guys' heads. We're far beyond mere conspiracies. We're far beyond it and being paranoid. These fools shut the economy down, and a bandwagon effect, and many different companies were doing it. For what? For this virus, which has an over 99% survival rate pretty much everywhere, even in the hardest hit spots. Like I've mentioned, I covered this, I gave you guys the data. The epidemiologists are saying 0.7 in the hardest hit area in New York City, where most of the deaths occurred. Let's say a large portion of them. Let's say most in one city, of course, is obviously the most populated city, but nonetheless the most heavily impacted city. And what did they have? A 0.7% infected fatality rate. In most other places, there's a 0.00% or 0.0%. That's what we're dealing with. And we shut the entire country down, which is unlike anything we've ever done in modern history. Yeah, we did it. And they shut it down and they changed the rules and they moved the goalposts time and time again. First they said it was about flattening the curve. Curve's pretty flat in most spots. The vast majority of the country does not have overwhelmed hospitals. We went through that period of time where hospital workers were being laid off. Even in the hardest hit spot, New York City, they may have got to near capacity in a lot of other places, but it wasn't anything that they couldn't handle. And they started rolling out some of those, emergency protocols. That's what they're there for, guys. And in other places, they already operate 70 to 90% capacity anyway on a non-pandemic situation. A lot of them are not not a lot of them, most of them are. The vast majority of them are. We've seen it. We've covered it. We've been covering it on this channel. Step away from your emotional, cling to certain things and narratives that you need to be true. Let's just look at the data and what it says. That's just what it says. That whole Houston thing. Houston, remember it was all over the news. Houston, they're struggling. ICU bed. And then their own CEOs of these hospitals said, no, that's not what has. You guys are misanalyzing the hospital beds. We only have like 400 hospital beds that are being used for COVID patients right now. We're prepared by phase 3 to have over 2,200 if need be. They want an apocalyptic virus. I don't know. But you remember, we shut the country down. They moved the post. They went from highlighting that. We had to flatten the curve. And then they moved to, well, now it's about people dying. Wait a minute. Flattening the curve never assumed that people weren't going to die. Flattening the curve never assumed that there weren't individuals that were going to get this virus. Instead, what it assumed was more so that you wanted to keep it, the number of infected, that more so, not even the number of infected, the number of people that needed the hospital's resources. You wanted to keep that number below what is available. So you have those resources. But then we started focusing on deaths, rising deaths. And then we went like through a 2-week period, 3-week period, had protests, riots. I told you all, lectured you about social distancing, and all of that stuff went through the window, out the window. While they got the parade around, health officials, these same health officials, experts, were green lighting that said this was so important of a cause that that's what they had to do. Okay? That doesn't make sense, and that goes to the contrary of everything you've been lecturing us about. Where you get these people just because they have masks, you said social distancing, we needed that, right? They weren't social distancing all across the nation. And then you have a rise in cases, but they said that, well, studies confirm that it wasn't the protest that did it. Well, that would make sense. Why are there any lockdowns if the masks are so effective? Seems like you do one, right? Just if there was the mask, it's like, okay, you got to mask the mask, no more lockdowns. If they were that effective, but that's not what's happening. We still have lockdowns all across the country. And then we're focusing on cases again. Once the rioting and the protests kind of died down, now we're focusing on cases. Confirmed cases go up. The percentage of positive cases go up, which could be for a multitude of different reasons. But they're going up. We're freaking out. Meanwhile, the deaths have trended down. What is it? What is it that we're supposed to focus on when these guys keep continuing to move the post? Is it about the deaths? Is it about keeping it under a certain, we're flattening the curve? Is it about not trying to get anybody infected and sitting here waiting unrealistically for a vaccine or something that may or may not come? This is why a lot of epidemiologists that were on the opposite side, believe it or not all scientists agree. This is why a lot of them were like, you should have gone and let it pass through. Quarantine the immunocompromised and the old elderly, pass through so we can exterminate this, get near extermination. Pass that virus around and so forth. This is why you had them saying that because of how infectious that this was. And what do? You kick the can down the road. I'm just telling you what they say. That God forbid that there's experts that disagree with your experts. This is not a cut and dry situation. And then we look at this, which really gets me going. Sweden that never did a lockdown. Deaths trending down. They say, well, look at the percentage. Look at the deaths. They have all of these more. They have more deaths than the people around them. If it was about flattening the curve, none of that matters. Are the hospitals overwhelmed? No. So what are we doing? Was it worth it? The deaths of despair that I talked about constantly, that may be a thing as more and more people are forced in a lockdown, losing their jobs. And as I covered in the last video, this is a real thing. As it states, Heather Long was Washington Post. Talked to Steven Manzano in late March, just after he lost his job in a Michigan bar. 2 weeks later, he died of a drug overdose. His first relapse in years. Ambulance data shows drug overdoses, 18%, 29%, 42%, going up each month. Now they expect me, because I'm against mask mandates more so. They expect me to take, and guys like myself, to take credit for all the potential deaths, which may, and from the people that get infected, again, which may come from folks that wear masks and don't wear masks. You don't know, but they expect us to take credit for those, value those. It's our fault. Yet they don't want to take credit for things like this that happen. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I'm just asking you, man, step aside from the emotional cling to this topic and start thinking rationally and consistently. A lot of you guys aren't. But the point that I'm trying to make when I talk about the non-argument that you guys bring up of it's just a mask. Everybody has every right to be skeptical of everything that you guys are doing right now and advocating. We have been paying attention for the last 4 months. You've continued to shift the post, and you've done something unprecedented and put 40, 50 million people out of work. It's just a mask. No, you don't get to say that. It's just a piece of cloth. It's just been everything. It's just been this, it's just been that. Just do this, just do that. They continue to say, all we had to do, just shut it down for about, 2 weeks. We'll be fine. And here we are. Months down the line. And now it's like people want to focus on people trying to keep people from dying altogether. Forces us in a lockdown, forcing us to cover our faces. Until when? Until a vaccine that may or may not come? Until cases go down? There's no metric, man. It's completely arbitrary. Just like their focus on the passing of bacteria and viruses. Completely arbitrary. We know for a fact that happened long before COVID-19 and will happen long after. If it's such an effective method, you'd be advocating, not even that. If it was just about saving one life, then you would for sure be, why not advocate that people cover their eyes and their faces for the rest of their lives? Just so they don't contract it, just so they don't pass along the viruses. Because it's not going to stop with COVID-19, it's going to continue. That's because it's completely arbitrary. When it comes to the other deaths or the other vast amounts of viruses and stuff like that can get passed around via coughing, sneezing, breathing, talking, what have you, touching. It's like, man, now everybody's focusing on this. We have a ticker. So every time there's more deaths, no matter the context, right? Because we know what the data says. Most of them are very, very old people. Most of them are immunocompromised. A lot of them would have died, if not from this, would have died from something else very soon. And that doesn't make death less tragic. What I'm saying is you're being completely unrealistic. Very unrealistic. But you treated us all like we were 95 years old. People like me, who my health status, my age group, statistically insignificant as far as us dying from this, even being hospitalized per 100,000. That is, looking like New York City. That's what the numbers say. So I'm least likely, but you treated me like you treat the old folk, using all your resources to try to force us to do these little things. Instead of dedicating those time, effort, and resources towards saving the most vulnerable, like the people that were in the nursing homes. And I believe a great percentage of people that have passed from this were in nursing homes, some of which you guys funneled to. Some of your beloved politicians, like your Cuomos of the world, funneled people to. Mandated that people be forced to take these patients in even though they had the virus. Very irresponsible. But that types of stuff happen, or those types of things happen, when you treat everybody the same, even though the virus, clear as day, the data says for most other demographics, you're going to be fine. You're never going to need to go to the hospital. You're going to be fine. The statistical outliers that may have some long-standing issues, that's not generally what's happening to everybody. And by the way, with all the other respiratory diseases and sicknesses, you can get some long-standing issues as well. It's not unique. That in itself is not unique to COVID-19. But because we're being told that this is what we got to do, here we are. Everybody's signaling, and now it seems like the mask thing has just become symbolism. It's just symbolism, where people go around thinking, if I wear this, I'm saving a life. And really all we're doing is treating everybody like they're guilty, treating everybody like they're sick, when we know that's not the case, which is why it's intellectually lazy and dishonest for you to suggest that the person without the mask just happens to be the one that's spreading it. You don't know that. We know this virus can pass through a multitude of different ways, including people that have masks and breathe out through the mask. I don't know what it's going to take for me to, because it's the same thing, right? I'm hearing the same arguments, just a mask, and people don't seem to be looking at the bigger picture. People don't seem to look at what's taking place because they're so emotionally tied to it. And it's like they feel as if the virus gives them near immunity, or it's an easy way to slow it down. Okay. Do you have to force people to do that? Threaten them with fines, which again ultimately boils down to, if I decide to resist in any type of way, you will send the goons. And that's what it's worth to you. I don't. And it is not my job, nor anybody else's job, to have you save me or nor me save you. You know, as it has been throughout the course of human history and modern history and your history, you know that life is a risk, no matter what it is that you do. To act like you can even rid the world of that, or to act like I should be held liable, or anybody else, just because they didn't do what you wanted them to do to limit it, that's just dishonest. Because think about the other things that you could do to limit it. You can just never leave the house either. I know some of y'all are actually advocating that, but some of y'all aren't. You can just live in a bubble. How about that? Live in a bubble in a room and just don't move. Have everything delivered to you. That's a way that you can limit it. But that's not what you're saying, because you've held the country hostage. And this is the last note that I'm going to end on. I want people to pay attention, because you got folks like that. I believe even Abbott was saying this, something along the lines, not exactly, but you hear this. People say this all the time. If you just wear the mask, we get to reopen. The sooner we can get. That's not your decision to make. And this is why I keep calling you guys what you are, and that's authoritarians. You don't get to hold other people's livelihoods hostage like that. Well, if you do what I say, then I can give this back to you. That's wrongful, man. The quicker we do this and we just wear the mask, the quicker we do that, we can go back to normal. You don't get to hold everybody's life hostage like that. It was never your decision to make. We don't have to choose between those. It's a false dichotomy. How about this? Don't mandate the mask and stop with the lockdowns. Simple. And if you want to stay your silly behind in a bubble in your house, fine, go do that. And if all of us want to assume the risk of getting potentially sick, that's just what we do. You don't get to hold the country hostage. You don't get to hold other people's livelihoods hostage. It kills me when people say that, man. It's just a mask. Just wear the mask. If you can just wear the mask, we can get back to doing. That was never your decision to make. What you did was use the state to force people into hiding, force people to shut down, force people to make it, you basically essentially made it illegal for them to operate their businesses. No matter if they wanted to assume the risk or not, you did that. You don't get to hold us hostage with that. We don't have to choose between those two. And again, you go back on that because y'all are okay with the damn protest. So the distancing thing ain't even a thing unless you want to make it a thing. Unless the politically slanted health officials and experts who greenlit all those protests and such. We have to kind of, that's why I call it a cult, man. That's why it's near religion. Because they treat these guys' word like it's gospel, even though we know that scientists disagree, many of which don't work for the governments. But we're not supposed to take them seriously. We got to take the ones that are within the government serious. And just those. Anything else, it doesn't exist. And because they have your educational elites, because they have your blue check marks, your entertainers and so forth on their side, they can pump out this garbage, and here we are. And now, what do we have? People still being forced into lockdown, and now they're being forced to cover their faces. Or they're threatened with fines, imprisonment, and so forth. It's insane. But it's just a mask, right? Seatbelt thing too is crazy. You need to make up your mind. The seatbelt thing is a terrible argument. People say, "What are are you griping about seatbelts?" Yes. First of all, seatbelt laws are stupid. But you said that the mask was supposed to save other people from me, potentially, even though I don't have the virus. But yeah, I may have it, according to you guys. Maybe completely asymptomatic, other people. So that's not what seatbelts are for. Seatbelts don't save other people unless I'm being shot through the I don't know, the windshield, and I will land on somebody and hurt them. I don't know. But that's the only way the seatbelt's supposed to save me. So why are you using that as an argument? They pumping these guys out of meals, and this is why they keep making the same argument. It's a terrible argument. Seatbelt laws are stupid. Plus, they go to the contrary of what you said the mask is supposed to do. Nonetheless, life is a risk, and it will be long after. It was long before. It certainly will be long after. I beg of you guys to analyze the data that's out there. Listen to ideas that are contrary to your beliefs. I've done it with the mask. This is why I'm like, why can I read this study that says, yeah, these masks aren't really effective? And then another one's like, yeah, these masks are it's almost like they're coming up to different conclusions. Almost like science doesn't always agree. How do you think I came to that? By looking it up. But the thing was, how I feel about it is irrelevant to whether the mandates are righteous or just. If I did suggest that you wear a mask, I would never suggest that you be forced to do that. That is wrong. That does not make it okay. This is the conundrum that the leftists, but it's not just leftists. We know Greg Abbott, which does know Greg Abbott's a leftist as far as I'm concerned. But it's not just them that more so advocate for stuff like this. It's okay to send the cops on people to punish them by way of the state if it's something that you want other people to do. It's only until it's not that it becomes an issue. Inconsistency. It's all around. But seriously, guys, we're talking about something, an infected fatality rate. This will make this just so mind-boggling. We're talking about something with an affected fatality rate in the 0.00s, bro, in a lot of places where it hit the hardest 0.7. So you're talking about a survival rate of 99.3 in the hardest hit spot in this country. And in a lot of other places, way less than that. As far as the infected fatality rate, meaning the survival rate is high. And we've shut down economies. We're forcing people to wear masks, making it illegal for them to be out in certain areas, doing certain things without covering their faces or doing certain things altogether, depending on where you're at in terms of the stages of these lockdowns. It's insane, man. And you have every right to be skeptical for those of us that have been paying attention to this, because you move the post every chance you get. So why would we just concede that, it's just a mask? It hasn't been just anything for the last 4 months. Just put on a mask. It's just a mask. These guys sound like robots, man. Don't be an authoritarian. It's not good. But seriously, I encourage you guys to look at it through a different lens and look at the other science that's out there. We'll be, of course, covering this on the upcoming weeks, and we have before. I was talking about this long before, about the data that was out there, and I still will be talking about it. But seriously, go look at that stuff, because it's not as cut and dry as you think. I know there may be one narrative that you see on TV or being pumped out there by your state, your government, but that's not the only position that's out there. Save lives. It's just so weird how people can just be so blatantly inconsistent and think they still making good arguments.